Okay, we're back. You're watching Caught for Two. We've had some technical network difficulties. It's bound to happen eventually. It hit us tonight. Probably all the wind. There's a giant wind advisory here in Champaign, Illinois. Maybe causing some network issues. Hopefully we're all settled now. I've got everything reconnected. We started a new stream. YouTube only lets me, YouTube has a built-in editor that will let you trim parts of the end, but only if it's not too long. Hopefully we caught it at 3 hours. That will let me chop it off the end, but okay, no big deal. We're having part 3 instead of 2 parts. It's 3 parts. Thank you to Jonathan and Duke of Zill who have stuck with it, and we're back. Okay, so tell me, where did we leave off? I know it was while we were reading The Police Informants. We're meeting in a theater because this police informant is afraid to get caught. And this person is just telling us Clara Rose's business at the Sidewalk Cafe is connected deep with gangsters and the mob, something we already knew completely. Is that where we left off in the middle of reading that? I think that's fine. I don't know if you guys want me to read that. You could tell me where we left off here. This is what I'll do. I'll just bring this up on screen. So you could freeze it at this point and reread it if I got stuck in the middle of it. All right. The word mannequin was the last thing you heard. Mannequin. Was there a mannequin in this one? Oh, yeah, it was a mannequin in the movie theater we were watching. I was wondering if this red-headed stepchild is a real movie with mannequins shooting up into the sun. He didn't tell us anything else. He just said, you're connected with the mob. All right. Next, informant. That was 17. Maybe we just make our way, if we're walking around downtown L.A. The closest next one looks like it's 12 or 13. Let's go to 12, the agency archives and records. I'm curious what that will be. What do you think the agency archives and records is going to have records on? Maybe the fingerprints? I sure would like to hear what fingerprints. Duke of Zill says that informant would have given us it seems like this is all confirmation that you should not go to the informants early. Like, why are the informants are giving away some fun stuff that we would have figured out on our own. All right, here we go. We're going to the archives. Let's see what the archives person says. As Trudy walks you through the concrete labyrinth beneath the agency headquarters, you keep your focus on her. It would be difficult, complicated, and probably disastrous to separate Trudy from the repository. They are both the bloodlines of the agency's knowledge, serpentine, vital, and musty. When she gets to her desk in the center of the catacombs, Trudy turns to face you. Clara Rose and Joe Fletcher, she says. Correct? You hazard a nod. She slips in behind her desk, pulls a pencil from the silver bun of her hair, writes Clara's name, one block letter at a time, onto a yellow form, followed by a flurry of swirls. She rolls the paper, sticks the paper in a capsule, the capsule up into a pneumatic tube. You watch as it flies like a rocket, and by the time you look back at Trudy, she's turned to this morning's crossword. Nimbus, you say. I'm sorry? 41 down, you point at the puzzle. 6-letter word for a stormy cloud. Thunk. A tube lands behind her, and Trudy pulls it out. She removes the paper, unfurls it, and reads. We have a record of ongoing separation proceedings. Clara Rose's lawyer is one Stephen Costa. Fletcher appears to be without counsel. She glances up. Might that help? It might, you say. Thank you. Didn't really help, Trudy. We already knew all that. So contrary to these informants giving us hints, well, they're just telling us stuff we already, very basic stuff we already knew. All right, let's go to 13. Our agency colleague. This is the experienced colleague. His name is Feswick at M4. So Feswick is supposed to be the experienced pro. We're just on probation. Let's see if Feswick has some information for us. Auxiliary agents are stationed in the Bradbury building, 3 blocks from GDA headquarters, just far enough that it's a bit of a walk and close enough that you'll be reprimanded for taking a cab. You could take your own car, though parking will flip your lid. The Bradbury has many layers, all of them inscrutable. Brown brick facade, 5-story glass atrium, maze of wood-paneled walkways and iron railings hazily lit, then a birdcage elevator. After that, the layers become levels, and you get off on the 5th. It's a square open space with row upon row of gray tanker desks, punctuated by the occasional water cooler. Banker boxes labeled either DA or GDA are stacked pretty much everywhere. Affixed to each desk is a brass plate engraved with either a name or a number. As a probationary cautionary auxiliary investigator, yours is number 23. There's a file on the desk. The front reads, Agent 24. A foot or so to your right, a bald man at another desk is typing. You say hello. What do you want? He says, still typing. Nothing, just hello. That's all? Well, my desk is 23 and my agent number is 24. So, he continues to type, is that a mistake? The agency doesn't make mistakes. Are you your desk? I'm not sure. You're not sure if you're a desk? No, I'm not. You're not sure. Okay, I'm not a desk. Okay, there you go then. You look at his nameplate. But your desk says Feswick. Is that who you are? He stops typing and looks at you. Are we going to have a problem? You look for somewhere to hang your coat. Okay, it's just, you know what it is? It's like introducing us to these informants that maybe in future cases we'll talk to. So it's almost like we're just getting a feel for them, but they're not helping us with this case, really. That guy didn't really have much time for us. Are there any informants left? Let's take a look here. We went to Ella Crane, our supervisor. She just told us to get busy out there. We went to Nolan Graves. He's the autopsy guy. He was the one guy who told us anything. He basically confirmed our theory that it wasn't a suicide. Trudy Stein in Records just told us that there were separation proceedings from Clara. Feswick didn't even have time for us. The newspaper city editor, I forget what she said, but nothing useful. Joe Muggy, the taxi driver, had nothing useful to say. Eddie Ilan, the columnist, told us that Clara Rose was basically a nice person, but keep the good information you find under your hat. Carl Burwich, the police informant, met with us at the theater and had nothing to say to us, really. He just told us that it was mobbed up, the Sidewalk Cafe. I guess we haven't been here. Cecil Natty, number 18, which is at whatever that is. L1? It's not L1. What is that letter there? Q1? Q1, yeah, there it is. Okay, so this is the underworld informant. Okay, this is the one person that might have something useful for us. Not that any of them have so far. So we're almost done. Then Jonathan says, I'm ready to look at our questions for the case if you guys are. Yes. Let's just do this one first and then let's look at our questions. Okay. I'll put a mark here. Out of all of your informants, even Muzzle, Cecil Needle makes you the loopiest. But of course, beggars who choose are called burglars, which is what Needle used to be. And you've got only so many snitches to pick from. Beggars who choose are called burglars. I ain't a snitch, says Nettie. At least you think that's what he said. It's hard to hear from this phone booth while he's standing in the one next to you, and neither of the phones are dialed in. What? You say? Hold it to your ear, says Nettie, gesturing with his own lifeless telephone receiver, so people think we're talking. We are talking, you say. We're just not hearing, Nettie. Can we get out of the booths and talk? Are you kidding? Nettie is hissing a whisper like he's got laryngitis. Then our cover's blown. You take a breath. It's always like this with Nettie. So much work to get hold of so little, usually nothing at all. So put in a dime, you call through the glass. I'll read you out the number. Why don't you? Shouts Nettie. I don't have a dime. You're telling it you want him to call you so you could talk on the phone. You fish through your pockets, your GDA badge, more like an ID card, a half pack of chewing gum, ticket stubs from last week's late night wrestling, 3 paper clips, and your wallet. Your wallet contains a $5 bill, a number of business cards, and 2 photos, one of your loving family and one of someone you want to forget. You have no dime. Good talk, you say, before hanging up. Then you step out of the booth, wave to Nettie, and head towards your car. Okay, so these informants are totally useless. Totally useless. But I don't know. I'm not really complaining about that. They're just sort of adding flavor. They didn't really help us. They're not hints. All right, so I think we've run out of stuff that's obvious to do. We've run out of leads. We've checked all our informants. As Jonathan says, maybe it's time to look at how to solve the case. So let's read what the official rules tell us about solving the case. It does say if your investigation has gone dry, try your informants. Then it says to close the case. To close your case, write your answers in the spaces provided on the final report, Form 15A. Once you're satisfied with your cleverness, slice the seal to discover the final interrogation and reveal. Okay, so here's the brochure. It has not been opened by anyone. Are you ready to solve the case? If you are, turn this over and fill out the form in the back. Then, only then, unseal the document to reveal the truth. So should we be looking at this if we want to go back into the field? It's not clear, but we're going to. We're going to look at this and then be willing to go back in the field. All right, let's see what we've got here. Final report, Form 15A. Who killed Clara Rose? Who killed Joe Fletcher? Who was sending threatening letters to Clara? What happened on April 3rd, 1930, and how do you know? Who were you attacked by and where? So this is a weird question. Everything else makes complete sense as something to deduce. This one feels like it's just saying, did you read that paragraph? And so I think this feels like it might almost be a question that's just making sure that you've gone to the important places. We were attacked by the Webbers at the Sandman Hotel. I think this question is just the Webb brothers. I think this question is just like to make sure you don't try to answer this until you've been there. All right, so I actually printed out a separate copy in case we wanted to write on it, because that's what the game is telling us. So I'm going to write Webb Brothers at Sandman Motel. All right, what happened on April 3rd, 1930, and how do you know? Okay, well, that we know the answer to because that's the birth certificate of this boy that was born on 1930. So we're going to say Clara's son was born. And we know from birth certificate and the last name Penta is how we're making the conclusion that it's definitely hers, plus the fact that he has this. Okay, so how do we know we have the birth certificate and we know it's her son based on various things? Going to his house of Andrew, him saying he missed his mother, the name is Penta, etc. This is, again, a little bit of a question that gives away information. It doesn't say just what happened on April 30th, but what happens on April 30th, 1930. So, I mean, this is the birth certificate that's from April 3rd, 1930. So this is kind of super obvious. But now we've got 3 questions that are a little more ambiguous from our standpoint. Who killed Clara Rose? Who killed Joe Fletcher? And who was sending threatening letters? So one answer to the first and third question is Joe Fletcher. That Joe Fletcher killed Clara Rose just as it appears, and that he was blackmailing her right from the start, which is what Thomas Deasy tells us, and what is somewhat suggested by the handwriting analysis, which I think we need to look at again now. So let's take a look. This is on the back of the letter from the law firm that is genuine, that was sent to Joe Fletcher. And he seems to be writing a reply before he passed out drunk. So he's saying, "Dear Stephen," he's writing to the lawyer who wrote him, saying, "There's no way in hell we're not sure what this is. There's no way in hell I'm done with you, son of a bitch. I'm done with this, you son of a bitch. My lawyers will," or something. And then he trails off. So there's a couple of confusing things here. First of all, he doesn't seem to have lawyers. So why is he writing "my lawyers"? We don't know of anyone with lawyers except for Clara. And this is Clara whose lawyer is writing this. So one question is this Joe Fletcher's handwriting? If so, why is he writing "my lawyers"? And what is he writing here? We found this in Joe Fletcher's old house as it was cleared out in the garbage, crumpled up, which makes us think that it's genuine and that this is his handwriting, unless it was a setup and planted here for us to find, which seems far-fetched but would be pretty cool. Now, let's take a look at these notes. The thing is that it almost has to be Fletcher who's blackmailing her, because otherwise she would divorce him, right? We know she wants to divorce him. So there has to be a reason why they're not getting divorced. And presumably it's because he has something on her. And we do find the birth certificate in his room, which suggests he was using that to blackmail her. Let's look at these notes. This is the one stolen first in February that the Sun gets hold of. Don't forget the Sun gets hold of this. Andrew says, Clara, I'm begging you for your own sake. You must stop. You know you have nothing without me. No career, no cafe, no nothing. This part about no career and no cafe really makes me think it's Thomas Deasy. You are mine and I am yours. We all made this bed and we all have to sleep in it. So come back to bed, Clara, before it's too late. And then this one, which was found in her P.O. box after the murder, she presumably didn't see this. This one's all I'm, and this one's all us. You are forcing us to do this, Clara. Make it easy and we will go easy on you. Continue to make it difficult and we will go public. Presumably about the illegitimate son. You can't run away from your past, Clara, or from us. Now let's look at the handwriting. The exclamation points look identical. What else do you notice? Anything jump out at you? The writing of Clara looks absolutely identical. Whoever wrote this Clara really looks like they wrote this Clara. What about this uppercase Y? It looks a little different. In fact, boy, does it look different. Look at the Y's here. The uppercase Y's here. There's one here versus this one here and this one here. Look at how on this page it goes loops up and comes down. Loops up and a little loop at the top. A little loop at the top. Whereas here, no loop. No loop. That's kind of strange, right? On the other hand, the non-capital Y's look like these Y's. These Y's don't have the loop. Only the uppercase Y's have loops. What else do you notice? So the uppercase Y's look different. Exclamation points look the same. These Y's that are not uppercase have very long Y's that continue to the right. Here's a Y. Well, this person's handwriting changes. This time, they printed this U instead of scripting it. Here they printed this U instead of scripting it. Looks the same. Printed it instead of scripting it. Strange. What else? What other letters can we look at? Any spelling issues, punctuation? And what about this handwriting? There are these Y's with the long loops that go to the right quite a bit. There's one there, there's one there. That matches these. He's drunk probably when he writes this letter. These two messages really are throwing me a bit. One is I, one is you. This one's making reference to career and cafe, which sounds to me... This one really... It's not just that... Can I just point out something out? It's not just that... I was talking before about Deasy is the one who owns part of the cafe and was her manager, career and cafe. And Jonathan, you were saying, like, do we know that... This is important. Let me turn off this so we don't get distracted for a second. You were saying, well, couldn't this be Joe Fletcher, and he was involved with her early career and the cafe? But can I point out that someone else mentioned while we were talking to them that, like, this is the traditional story of the rich woman and the hanger-on. So I don't think... We don't know how Fletcher met Clara, but I don't think there's any sign that she got any money from her husband. In fact, she's paying him alimony, which suggests he was poor and had no money. So why you would have nothing without me? No career, no cafe, no nothing. That doesn't sound like the husband. Now let me see on the chat what you guys are thinking. So Jonathan Warner, it's scrolled up so you can't see it, said, my answers were killed Clara was Fletcher, killed Fletcher Andrew, wrote blackmail Fletcher. Then Duke of Zill says, here's my crazy 1000 to 1 long shot murder theory. The gun belonged to former Detective Needham, Andy's adopted father. The gun was issued to him in his detective days. He's acting on behalf of son. We're told that the gun is a military issue, so I don't think it's going to have been issued to him in his detective days. John says, us could mean Fletcher and her son, if it's also Fletcher's son. I don't think it's going to be Fletcher's son. If they got married, they would be able to have the kid. We don't know when they got married, right? This letter doesn't say alimony payments effective date April 1st, 1948. That's when it's ending. But they separate in 46. I don't think we were ever told when they got married. It might be nice to know. But I don't believe you'd have to have an illegitimate kid if you were going to get married. You'd find a way to say it's your kid. I'm not sure, though. Duke of Zill says, Fletcher doesn't seem like he valued the boy other than as a pawn. Yes, I would agree with that. The G's in the begging on the gray note and the go on the yellow note look very similar. Both don't close the G. Let's see. The G's in the begging on the gray note. I'm begging. Those are some very interesting looking G's. Match the G's on the yellow note on the go. No, they don't really. A little bit. A little bit. You're saying these goes in begging match these goes and go easy and go public. A little. Not a lot, though. They don't. I mean, I guess. Not huge. They don't jump out at me as being obviously the same, though. Are there any more G's in here that we can look at to see the variety? Well, there's two different kinds of G's. It's interesting. Look at this begging note. There's the two G's in the middle, and then there's the G at the end, which does a loop and a cross. So even within this one note, he's writing G's in two different ways. Boy, the exclamation points look the same, though. How do you... I have a question. Like, look at the way these Y's are written, right? You go up, you loop, you come down, and you go across. You go up, you loop, you come down and go across. How do you write these Y's, this Y here? How do you write that? Like, if you go up and come up here, how do you connect? Do you see what I'm saying that I'm confused about? Like, here's the Y. It goes like this. How would you write that? Are you writing it like this? And then you somehow go exactly down on this line to go like this? Or when we look at that, is it that they're writing it like this? Like, how do you write a Y without a loop? Unless you're doing it this way. But who would do that? That looks more like this, with nothing crossing back on it, but that's a crazy way to make a letter, right? Those Y's are confusing me. The A's, the capital A's are also very pronounced. They're like a curved thing, but I don't think we see any capital A's here. These lowercase A's are pretty stylized too. They've got a big little curly. Here it goes down, down. How do they look here? Yeah, that's pretty similar. Let's go back to the chat. Maybe I'm overthinking it. To me, the blackmail letters seem to be written by DZ. The context seems to say DZ, but then how could DZ write the third note, the drunken one? Yeah. I think that it's interesting that the second us note comes after Andrew seems to have found out about his mother and that she's being blackmailed. Yes, this one is way back in February. So this is the real one, we're guessing, but is this one fake? Or I don't know. And imagine that Fletcher did this for a second. he writes her this note towards the beginning of April. She doesn't quite get it, and he kills her before she gets it. Like, she didn't get this letter yet. This was in her P.O. box. She hadn't picked it up yet when she was killed. So how does Fletcher write this letter to her, threatening her, and then end up killing her? Let's go back to the chat for a second. The R's in 3 out of 4 uses of Clara are very identical, looking more like V's. The Clara, I think this Clara looks identical, but it almost, well, I think someone's got a good point that I hadn't even thought about. I was going to say, well, if you had this note, you just copy this and if you had this note, obviously this would be an obvious word to try to get exactly right. But that begs the question, how could the person writing this note have access to this note? They couldn't. The son has access to this note, he stole it, but DZ and Fletcher don't. So a bigger question would be, if we believe this is Fletcher's handwriting, can we say that this handwriting and this handwriting is the same? The handwriting is throwing us a little bit, but on the other hand, it's fair that it's not such an exact science. See what else the chat has to say. It's a meta, but maybe if the notes are being handwritten by employees, they are just making some small accidental differences. Yeah, I mean, not just that, but it's not crazy when you write something months later or while you're drunk, you write slightly differently. You can see even within one letter, sometimes you're writing one way, sometimes you're writing another way. I think that feels realistic. Perhaps he's writing the Y the way you write a 4. Both notes have sentence that ends with ... Clara. Yeah. Assuming these are written by the same person, I think that's logical to assume, based on the exclamation point and close enough. Why is it me and I here? You are mine, I am yours. And then here it turns to us. This is the one sent to her. This is the one found early. Not only that, but it's found early. Come back to bed, Clara, before it's too late. Let's do something for a second. To still, in the chat, it says, to still circle dot your exclamation points while drunk means it's ingrained in how you write. How people would do that. Surely all 3 are written by the same person. So he's doing it here too, yeah. I think you're probably right. I think they are written by the same person, which, oh, but boy, no career, no cafe, no nothing. That really makes me feel like it's not Fletcher, but it could be. Let's take a second here and look at the business directory and see if there are places that we might get more information that we've overlooked. Academic, School for Girls, John's Academy, Vincent School. Accounting services. There's the morgue, we went to it. Detective agents, we went there. A different detective. Petroleum. a bar. Alterations. We tried going there, asking for our person. Apartments. No reason to go there. Auto dealers. No real pertinent reason to go there. Barbers. Not really. Clothing, we went to a couple places looking for Camille. We didn't find her. Okay, let's see. Community organizations. The orphanage we went to. Moon Theater Church. We are told that our guy Chaz always goes to church first. I wonder if there's a reason. It doesn't seem like that would be a it seems like he's got a solid alibi. I'm just remembering how the game was like he goes to church in the morning and comes here after church. It's DZ that we'd really love to find his timeline. Let me just look at here. Chaz 228. When you turn up at his house, Chaz Burrell. Okay, so Chaz Burrell was in E4, by the way, which is on this map. Just for this, I want to see if there's a church near his house, just for fun. So E4 was Chaz's house. If we look for a church that might be in this neighborhood, there's RCNMCOP. Nothing really. There's a C4. 607. Nothing. All right. Contractors. Dentists. Employment agency. Furniture. Grocery. Hardware supplies. Insurance. We need to always follow up with insurance. I'm just going to look up 830 to make sure no one took out a policy on her. No. Legal. Did we go to all the legal places? I think we did, right? I'm pretty sure we did. 055. Yeah, I think we did. Lodging. Sandman Hotel. Anything else? Maternity home? Is it possible that there's information about her in the maternity home? Whatever that is. 521. No. Medical. Medical. Pharmacy. Drugstore. Newspaper. There's other newspapers. 1416. We went to those. What's 169? No, no entry. Post office. We found her post office. Printing and copying. Restaurants. Sidewalk Cafe. Trocadero. Awning, rug, picture framing, radio repair, upholstering, alarm company. Let me look up the alarm company, 274. No. News and cigar. And the taxi. Okay. Is that the only theater we've seen in the directory? The Moon Theater. Where did we find that? Moon Theater 736. I don't know. Let's look that up just in case. No, no entry for the Moon Theater. I have noticed there are some entries we haven't read, though. I don't know how to get to them. We'll look them up at the end, but it does feel like there's some stuff we haven't seen. So there are clues in the book that we have not come across. We haven't figured out how we could get there. I wonder if we're overlooking something important. I can't think of what it would be, though. Let's look at our notes again and see if there's any place we don't remember being at. I'm going to go through my notes quickly here. 3 sets of footprints. Photoplay magazine was her thing that they think the robber got hold of. We were never able to find the wife of William Hale, Camilla. That bothers me. Jack Overfield, the producer, didn't have any good information. Security guy had no information. Washington Boulevard gas station, that was not useful. Gwendolyn Tate, that was the actress who was slightly jealous. We went to the hotel. Andrew Eli Pent. There's no Eli last name in the directory, is there? There's no Eli. That's a good idea, though. If you found someone whose last name was Eli, that could be the father. But there isn't. There's just an Elliot. And Ellis. No Eli. Ernie Kellogg. We didn't find a Cohen. Christian Dior. That was Mrs. Hale was wearing Christian Dior and fancy gloves. Who's Barry Miller? Says we already went to visit him, 98. Does anyone remember? Barry Miller, the Sidewalk Cafe's dishwasher, I see. He tells us about Chaz. He says that Chaz has sway over DZ. He owes him money. Jonathan is reminding us that there is the clue about the choose your own path when you fight. Duke is saying there must be a way to find Camille. We found Howard Hughes and he's barely involved. I think you're reinforcing what my gut tells me too. We've seen a bunch of mentions of the wife, and it took us a while to find her first name. One person said, I don't know her first name, then we finally found her first name. Why is it that we're being led to the wife, and we're told the wife started the argument? Why is it that we can't find the wife? Why is it that we can't find the wife? Let's look. If we go to the club, he says, she was in a proper fighting mood. The mood of hers led to 2 separate episodes. Incident the first was with a woman in a Christian Dior dress. Words were shared, tempers flared. The woman in the dress, emerald green, fabulous gloves. Do you know who she was? Indeed I do. I'd say she was the wife of William Hale, Miss Hale. First name unknown to me. And then when we visit Ida Lupino, she's the one who tells us that her name is Camille. Let's find where we read that to see if we can get more on Hale. Maybe it's we should see if it's the 103 is Ida Lupino. So we took to Ida Lupino. She says, I think you got the wrong idea about Clara. It's not like she was on some rampage. In fact, at the beginning of the night, she was fine. She was excited about going to London. You ask about the incident. Well, the one with Miss Hale was all Mrs. Hale. She just went at Clara, and I think it's pretty obvious what that was about. But why Camilla chose then and there to confront Clara, I couldn't tell you. The thing then later, that was Clara's doing. And then we know she made the phone call in between. So is Miss Hale the one who's starting all this? Like, that could be a big clue. Camilla. That's right. Duke of Zil says, she seems critical in starting the chain reaction of events that lead to Carla's death. Yeah. Her name is Camilla, Camilla. Maybe the stuff with Camilla got her rattled. Wow, it really does sound like we need to find Camilla. Camilla Hale. She's described as being dressed in some fancy thing. Let's go visit Hale again and see if he gives us some clue that we missed. So Hale, 789. We don't know where he lives. William Hale's wearing a silk leopard print bathrobe. Hope you don't mind if Miss Andrews here strips the old mug while we talk. Who's Miss Andrews? She works there. Do you think she might know? Oh my God, that would be so amazing if there's an Andrews that we can talk to and she knows about the wife. Andrews, Mrs. J.C. Andrews, 77. I'm going to write this down. 789. He does look at her funny. 79 is W. Hale. Let's look at this again. So Andrews is taking off the makeup, right? Miss Andrews, a tiny woman in a checkered dress, nods demurely and starts dabbing Hale's cheeks with a sponge. And then, how would you describe your relationship with Miss Rose? Hale glances at Miss Andrews, who has removed a layer of thick black makeup from one of his eyebrows. Do you think Miss Andrews... She's mentioned again at the end. He looks at Miss Andrews. She looks away. You exit the trailer. Okay. So now, let's find Miss Andrews. We've got a Mrs. J.C. Andrews at 77. Let's see if we've got... Duke of Zil said, could this blow this wide open? That's what that's my line. I always say it's going to blow it wide open. Okay. There's no entry for 77 for Miss Andrews. But there are two other Andrews, a Nick Andrews and a Harry Andrews, 933 and 406. Let's see. There's no 406. And there's no 933. I was so sure that was going to be it. I was so sure that was going to be it. Really? Nope. I was really sure we were going to find Miss Andrews. Jonathan says, I think Miss Hale might just be worried her husband will run away with Clara at the end of the shoot of the film. I mean, yeah, sure, it's not crazy that she's just confronting her about the affair, but she does seem to have stirred up Clara. But from a meta standpoint, it really feels like we should be able to talk to Camilla. The fact that we had to work so hard to find her first name. Look, there's an entry for Clark Gable, 37. Let's read this entry for Clark Gable. An elegant iron gate blocks the driveway entrance to Clark Gable's mansion. You try the intercom but get no answer. You press the button a dozen more times before deciding maybe, just maybe, the name in the motel registry was fake. Okay, so that's just a little side thing. So if we're lucky, all of our unchecked clues were about that kind of thing. B2. I'm just going to mark. So we actually, remember in the motel, there's a fake entry for Clark Gable. So this is what happens if we actually look up Clark Gable and try to go there. But surely we have to be able to find Camilla, but how? I'm going to try these alteration services. 199. No. 745. No. 5. Oh, these are babies. I'm not going there. Cleaners and dyers. Cleaners and dyers. She did have a green thing. Maybe she's got her. No. Modern 605. No. Shoe repair. No reason to look at her shoes. Dress code authority is 221. No. Cleaners 882. No. 500 cleaners. How are we going to track down Camilla? You think it's a total red herring? It's just there's so many other people that we were able to find for no reason. And here we got Camilla mentioned like 3 different times. 448. No. I'm looking up clothing lines here. Fur I checked before, 257, no. Chain belt, 423, no. Lingerie, 62, no. Sports shop, 830, don't know why she'd be there, no. Diamond setters, 755, no. Paulson's, we checked that already, 370, no. Department store, 997, no. Misfit clothing, $2.97. We checked there. All right. So despite her fancy stuff, she's not there. Could she have been coming from somewhere when she was at the bar all dressed up? She was at the Trocadero Club. She was at the Trocadero nightclub. Could she have been coming from somewhere? Fancy where she would have dressed up. The Moon Theater, we looked at that, right? 736. We looked, we didn't find an entry. Were we told anything more about her? Beauty salons. I don't think Camilla's in the game. I think this is a bug. Yeah, I think you might be right, Jonathan. Let's just quickly see. Barber and beauty shop, 619. This would be stretching it. I feel like we might have overlooked something. If we were playing Gumshoe now, we would peek at some of the ones that we haven't visited. 779. 449. 143. These are beauty shops I'm looking for. And lastly, the beauty salon at 63. It's not there. Let's see which clues we haven't read. Okay. Let's see what clues we haven't read and take peeks at them. Here's a 35. Hickman. Okay, we did actually go to that one. That's when we visited the detective at his house. Okay. So far, we've been to all of these. Until 291. That looks like it was I think that might have been the fighting one. If we chose our own adventure to fight. Okay. So far, I think we've been to all of these. 556. Okay, that was the one we went to. This was we actually did go to this one. This was the dispatch. Okay. 614. That looks like it was a different way to get to the hotel. Like the choose your own adventure there. So maybe that's no big deal. Just from a quick glance at it by my 824. This is Howard Hughes. We went to this one. Maybe we did go to all of these. We're almost at the end here. 902. Sure, sorry, I think you have the wrong post office, says the teller, snapping her gum as she looks through the register. We don't have that P.O. box or that name. Hey, isn't she some movie star? You thank her and head for the door. Okay, so this would be if we weren't as clever as we were to guess which post office she had her P.O. box at. Okay, guess what? We've seen it all. Okay, that was a good decision. Sorry for stretching that out, guys. I did not want us to make a mistake in such an engaging case. I didn't want us to have missed something important. So Camilla, we can't find. That's a little mark when we talk about it in the review. And Miss Andrews. Okay, but we have now seen everything. There are only two we hadn't been to. One was Clark Gable's house. One was the wrong post office. And then there were a couple that looked like they were alternate things at the hotel if we had chosen differently. All right, so the thing to do now, we've had a 1 hour, 15-minute session. We haven't gone offline, is to take our 8-minute break. I know you guys must be getting tired, but let's take our traditional 8-minute break, and then we will make our final guesses. I don't know what I'm gonna guess, but let's do 5-minute break because we've had enough downtime. 5-minute break, we'll come back, we'll try to solve the case. Okay, we're back. You're watching Caught for Two. This is our third stream. It's been a long case. It's 5 a.m. and it's time for us to put our money where our mouth is and try to solve the case. And it feels like we might be coming down slightly differently. We're going to avoid talking about, we'll review the case afterwards. Right now, we're just focusing on our final theories. Remember, our questions are, who killed Clara Rose? Who killed Joe Fletcher? Who was sending threatening letters to Clara? Okay. This is kind of exciting. Let's hear the theories. All right, so we've got Duke of Zil saying, I'm torn with this one. If it wasn't for DZ's excellent scene denying it, I'd be all in on him being the murderer. Jonathan Warner says, I'm sticking with who killed Clara was Joe Fletcher. Who killed Fletcher was Andrew, the son. Who's sending threatening letters was Joe Fletcher. Andrew seemed to already know about the deaths, and his dad might have taught him how to use a pistol. I think Fletcher lost it. Maybe she was finalizing divorce to get with Hale and go to Europe. I think Andrew saw Clara get shot and then either just picked up the gun and shot Fletcher, or they struggled and Fletcher got shot. That seems very reasonable. Duke of Zil says, did we ever get an alibi for DZ? We did not. When we went and talked to him, he denies it. He says he knows about the secret. But no alibi. He tells us that Fletcher was still in love with her. It's interesting, though. They're both in that hotel. We don't know when they checked in. No, okay, I don't think we have an alibi. Okay, Duke of Zil says, I think there's too much evidence placing Andrew at the scene. The locket is telling. The locket is the only evidence placing him at the scene, but it does make sense that the locket is telling. I think we're all in agreement that the son, Andrew, must have been at the scene. And we're all in agreement that he probably put the locket in her hand, gave her the locket, right? So the only question is whether he shot, and he wouldn't have shot her. So the only question is, did he shoot Fletcher? We went to Fletcher's house. Obviously, we've been everywhere, but when we go to Fletcher's house, what are we told? 509. So we talked to, Fletcher's the booze hound. That's where we find the crumpled up stuff. It's cleaned, but not scrubbed down yet. I kicked him out. Garbage can is full and ripe. That's when we find this note here. Okay, Duke of Zil, what is your theory? I reserve the right to present my theory last. As the person streaming in front of the camera. I think that Jonathan's three answers, that Fletcher killed Clara Rose, that Andrew killed Fletcher, and that it's Fletcher blackmailing her, has some reasons to believe that's reasonable. That seems the most straightforward. What gives me a little pause, and then Andrew shoots Fletcher after watching Fletcher kill his mother. He somehow gets the gun from him, or Fletcher dropped it, as you say. And then he gives the mother the locket and leaves. That is completely reasonable, and it's sort of consistent with the handwriting here, although it doesn't explain how it went from I'm to us. And then in your thinking, Jonathan, this no career, no cafe, no nothing, you're just thinking, well, Fletcher, we don't know Fletcher's background. We don't know why he would think he's responsible, but he might. All reasonable. It matches with the handwriting and the blackmail stuff. The only thing that gives me a little bit of pause is how the son gets the gun so that there are two gunshots in close enough succession that people don't remark about the long delay. Like Andrew's sitting from afar watching him shoot, and then here's the scenario, okay? If you think that Andrew was off in the bushes somewhere, just staring at his mother, then how is the meeting comes over, Fletcher and Clara are talking, Fletcher pulls out a gun, shoots her in the stomach, and then somehow stands right there after he's killed someone for a long enough time for the son to come out of the bushes, fight with him for the gun, or he dropped the gun, pick it up, and kill him. That seems a little weird. 3 footprints leads me to think they must be Andrew, Clara, Fletcher. That's a good point. 3 footprints. I hadn't thought of that with my theory. It does suggest that there weren't 4 people. That's a very interesting point. If we think that, that's a very good point. That makes it much more consistent with Jonathan's theory. If there's 3 footprints, and we think Andrew must have shown up with the locket in the end, then the 3rd print is Andrew's, and there can be no other fingerprint, so it has to be Andrew's that killed Fletcher. That's a very good theory. I think that's a... Duke of Zill says, I'd love there to be 4 sets of footprints. Yes. I would too, from my theory. I would too. Jonathan is proposing a reasonable scenario. Maybe Fletcher thinks he's responsible because he introduced everyone. We don't know. Could Deasy be Andrew's father? I don't think we know who the father is. I really don't. I don't think it's important in a way. I think she's just broken up about having an illegitimate son. It could be a son from the producer. I don't think it's relevant, though. Unless Andrew gave the locket earlier that day and hung around to continue watching his mother, making Deasy the 3rd set of footprints at the scene and the killer. Yeah, how else could she get the locket? We don't think she had the locket because she complained to the police that she didn't have the locket. And it's in her hand, which suggests that she just got it. I'm going to come up with a different theory, even though I'm not opposed to Jonathan's theory. Weren't her complaints in February? Yeah, okay, so here's going to be my theory. My theory is going to be there's a little love triangle with Deasy. And that he, in fact, was in love with Clara. And that somehow Deasy is writing these notes. Whether he's writing this note to set up Joe Fletcher, I don't know. Or the handwriting's different, I don't know. I'd like to think he was setting him up. But I'm going to say it's DZ writing this. And he's in love with her. And that maybe DZ and Fletcher are blackmailing her. Or maybe Fletcher is blackmailing her, but it's DZ who's trying to tell her, you've got to keep paying him and do all this stuff because otherwise you'll expose all of us. You'll send me to jail for defrauding the books, and maybe he's writing about how Fletcher's going to make his life trouble. I don't know. But so my theory is going to be that DZ gets the call from Clara at the club, and she says, I'm going to tell everything. I'm tired of this. I'm done with it all. I'm going to tell everyone. I'm going to tell Fletcher that that we're together, or something like that. And that DZ realizes the jig is up for him, and he's never going to have her, and he's in love with her, and she's lost. And DZ decides to kill her and set up his best friend to take the fall. So he tells Fletcher that he's going to meet with Clara tomorrow, and that the three of them show up to talk it over or whatever. And at that point, DZ pulls out his gun, shoots Clara in the heart, turns around, shoots his best friend right in the face. In the scuffle, loses his hat, picks up the wrong hat, and runs. And that Clara rips the locket off her neck, or from her pocket, which she had gotten from Andrew in the weeks before. So my answer is going to be that DZ killed Clara Rose and DZ killed Joe Fletcher, and DZ was sending the threatening letters to Clara. Feels weird that it's all the same, and that the Andrew is just gave her her locket back when he met her last week. As Duke of Zil says, her complaints about the missing locket were in February, plenty of time for Andrew to reunite. The one weird thing is it was Andrew just there to spy on his mother. I don't think Andrew needs to be on the scene anymore, if you think of it that way. We were thinking about it. We were thinking about the locket in her hand was because Andrew just put it in her hand. But now I'm thinking she had that locket in her pocket. She couldn't wear it because she was in costume. So she had it in her pocket. And as she's standing there dying, she picks it out to look at it one last time. Duke of Zil says, was it set up meeting with Fletcher, Andrew, and Clara? Could be. Did Farhad hear anything? Let's read what he says. It's very short. Here's what Farhad overhears. Something about plans to meet alone, though not wanting to do it, and needing to keep it on the down low sly, the QT, the hush hush, something like that. I might have heard mention of a boardwalk. It's interesting, boardwalk, because Washington Boulevard. Okay, something of a boardwalk, rental units, trips abroad, a door prize, a racehorse, a baby, a leopard, and someone named Chuck or Chet. And then don't forget, we hear the other side of that conversation from the Sidewalk Cafe owner, 404. So here, she phoned to check in. She does that. But what does it have to do with Joe Fletcher? He was banned from this place long ago, before I even started working for Clara. So I wouldn't have seen him. It was him that shot her, right? Okay, So you talked to Clara that night. Were you the only one to speak to her? No, she asked to speak to Thomas Deasy, our bartender, so I put her on. That's it. So she calls that night, spoke to Deasy. Farhad hears her making an appointment to meet. Then they're saying she's upset about losing control of her bar. So she calls Deasy. That's the thing that's making me more think it's Deasy. She calls Deasy to set up some meeting and ends up with meeting Fletcher. Deasy and Fletcher are side by side, though. They're like best friends for 30 years. So it wouldn't be surprising if they're both manipulating Clara. Could you imagine the case where, here's another theory. What about this as a theory? Deasy and Fletcher go to confront Clara, tell her they're going to ruin her life if she tries to leave and all that. And Clara has Fletcher's gun from when they were married and shoots Fletcher in the face. Deasy grabs the gun pretty easily from her, rips it off, shoots her in the heart. That would make Clara the person who killed Fletcher, and then Deasy killed Clara. All right, I think it's time to have our final vote from Duke of Zill, and then Jonathan has given us his final answer. I've given my final answer, although I'm starting to warm to the idea that Clara shot Fletcher in the face with a gun she got from him. I'll note something cool about how the ending is going to be. We're told that in the dispatch that they got fingerprints on the weapon, but we weren't told them. That's what the final answer is going to be. They're going to be the resolution of the fingerprints on the gun. I want to change my answer to say that Clara shot Fletcher. Okay, I'm changing my answer official. I'm going to say Clara shot Fletcher, then Deasy killed Clara. And blackmail letters were sent by both. Although I'm not sure. All right, Duke of Zill, come on, give us your answer. Deasy killed Clara, Deasy killed Fletcher. Okay, good. So you're going with my original, you're sticking with my original theory. Deasy killed both of them, and I'm going, good. Okay, so Duke of Zill is gonna be a representative of my original theory. I'm switching over to say they were both doing it to her. And yeah. Okay, here we go. Are we ready? We're ready to open, I think. Got to break the seal here. All right, here we go. I'm saying Clara shot Fletcher, Deasy shot Clara. And I'm saying for blackmail, yeah, blackmail, I'm saying, I really want it to be Deasy. I just don't. For blackmail, I'm going to go with Deasy, even though I believe it's Fletcher, because I can't stand being wrong about it. Okay, here we go. Here we go, guys. Lights, camera, reveal. When you arrive, Officer Hickman, Detective McTeague, and a couple of stern-looking beat cops are already assembled in front of the house. No one looks out for their own like the LAPD. You nod and say good day and make your way up the stairs. I'm trying to block this. Make your way up the stairs with only a bit of elbow jostling. You can't help but admire the loyalty, or at least the show of it. The arrest warrant would have easily leaked, but you doubt they know much more than that. You knock on the door and it opens. Ex-Detective Reggie Needham looks you in the eye, and for a moment you're unsure, not of the case, no longer of the case, but of what he's going to do. He stands aside, lets you in. Where is he, you ask? Needham takes a moment, then a deep breath. Backyard, he says, and together you walk through the house. At a rough-hewn, handmade picnic table in the shade of a banyan tree sits young Andy Needham, born Andrew Eli Pent. His father walks toward him, and it's only now you see how different they look, though in so many ways they seem so alike. You take out the locket, open it up, and put it on the table. Clara Rose at 18 years old when she shot her first movie, Miss Dakota Pent. Andy looks at you and you can see his mother's eyes full of pain and regret. Do you have anything to say for yourself, Andy, you ask? With his head in his hands, he begins his confession. Who killed Clara Rose? Joe Fletcher. Who killed Joe Fletcher? Andy Needham, the son. This is Jonathan's theory here. Who was sending threatening letters to Clara? Joe Fletcher. Jonathan got these right. This is Jonathan's theory. What happened on April 30? How do you know? Andy Needham was born Andrew Eli Pent to Clara Rose, who gave him up for adoption. You know this based on the birth certificate, the locket, the Clara Rose film. Who were you attacked by and where? Those redheaded twins, the Webb brothers, attacked you. Okay, so Jonathan got all these right. I said, who did I say killed Clara? I got this all wrong. I thought that, I don't even remember what I said. But I know I thought that Deasy shot Clara after Clara shot Fletcher. So I got these completely wrong. Okay. All right, so he's confessing. I knew I was adopted. My parents told me. And I was really okay with it. But then about a year ago, I got a letter in the mail telling me who my birth mom was. I thought it might be a joke, but it kept digging at me. Then a man showed up at my school, said he'd written that letter. He showed me my birth certificate. Told me he was my dad. So Fletcher was his dad. He said my mother was in danger and we had to help her. I didn't know what to do. I know I should have told my dad, I mean my real dad. Andy looks at Reggie Needham, but I didn't. I wished my mom was still alive. I mean my mom, not my birth mom. She died 2 years ago. He looks at the locket on the table. I guess I got kind of obsessed with seeing my mom, I mean Clara Rose. I watched all her movies again and again. I tried to find her house. I just wanted to see her and protect her. Of course, she wasn't home, but I did find a letter, and I knew at once it was from my birth dad. It had the same handwriting as the letter he sent me. Oh, so when the kid finds this letter in the house, he recognizes that it's written by the same guy who sent him a letter telling him who his real mom was, which is Fletcher. So Fletcher confronted the kid, said, you're my kid and your mom is whoring around or whatever. I don't know what he's trying to why he's trying to make the kid not like his mother. I don't know. And that's when I knew he was the one who was threatening her, trying to hurt her. I also found that he points to the locket. I found that. Points to the locket. You ask him to continue to proceed to the day of the murder. It was the day after they let me out. He came to my school, said we were going to see Mom for my 18th birthday. I was both excited to see her and frightened as heck. I knew I had to try to protect her, to help her, to save her. Andy starts to cry, then chokes it down and continues. At first it was like a dream, like an actual dream I had. There was a cannon there, a noose, and both my birth parents. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. My mom was more beautiful than I ever imagined, and she was right there. At first, she looked shocked, then worried. But then she just smiled at me. So he brought the son to meet her on the birthday of the son. He brought her to the lot to meet her mom, and her mom sees him. And it was like everything was going to be okay no matter what. I had a mom. Andy is crying now, but continues his story. I had the locket. I just wanted to give it to her, to give it back to her. I felt her hands. That was the first time I ever touched her. I mean, that I remember. And she was holding the locket and smiling at me and crying, smiling right at me. He grabs the locket off the table and looks at you. Then in one moment, it all just changed. Joe Fletcher moved towards us like he was going to hug us or hit us. I don't know. But my mom, Clara, just started yelling for him to get away from us. Then Joe was yelling too, or more like growling. Wow, this is so realistic, though, that he wants to kill his wife. Like, say, look at what you've done. You've abandoned your son. You've abandoned me. You want to divorce me and leave me. Like, this is how murder-suicides happen. Okay, you ask what Fletcher said. He said, I'm the one who gave it to you. I thought he meant the locket, but then he was looking at me. And that's when he started with the question. He called it Otto's question. Kept yelling, tell him the question. At least tell him the question. Andy's getting more distraught. You ask him to take a deep breath. He does. Then you ask about Otto's question. He breathes again and again. His eyes go steely. You have to decide, Clara Rose. Andy rises to his feet. His voice is booming, his nostrils flaring like he's channeling Joe Fletcher quoting Otto Friedrich. For a moment, you see his mother's stage presence, her talent. You have to decide, Clara Rose. It's really very simple. Are you a mother or are you a movie star? And just like that, the breath goes out of him. He sits back down at the table, closes the locket. You ask what happens next. She started to laugh, and I remember just what she said. She said, that's not the question. The question, Joe Fletcher, is this. Are you still so dumb after all these years that you really think he's yours? Andy's intonation is impeccable. It's like his mother is there, mocking you all beneath the banyan. You ask what happened then. Andy looks at you. It was madness. She was laughing and crying all at once, like she was trying to sing, and then just like that, the whole world exploded. You ask him to explain, to slow it down. I don't know. I saw the gun. It was in Joe's hand. His eyes were glowing red. Fire leapt out of the gun, and my mother flew against me. She hit me like a falling tree and crashed onto the ground. You ask him to continue. I don't know. I thought he was going to keep on shooting. I grabbed at the gun, but even as we fought, I knew my mom was dead, both of my moms, and I think I was screaming. I fell back, and the gun was in my hands. He leapt at me. I pulled the trigger. And he's shaking now, staring at the locket in his hand. You stand up and slowly walk with his father across the yard, out of the boy's earshot. That's it, says ex-detective Needham. His voice is sad, tired, but resilient. Yeah, you say, I guess that's it. Looks like Fletcher shot himself after all. He stops walking and turns to you, don't you think? You look back at Andy, such a singular boy of a man sitting beneath the banyan tree. You didn't sign up for this. Couldn't expect it, and sure as hell don't need it. You turn to his father, look him in the eyes, and nod. Were you right? Well, Duke of Zill says, what a piece of work, fantastic. Yeah, I think I agree with that. That was a very powerful, emotional ending, very fitting of film noir. The last final scene of the father saying, well, I guess that's it. Looks like Fletcher shot himself after all. And we look back at the kid. You didn't sign up for this, couldn't expect it, and sure as hell don't need it. You turn to his father, look him in the eyes, and nod. And this idea that Joe Fletcher really did still love her brought her son into this sort of as a pawn, thinks it's his son too, confronts her and is like, choose if you're going to become a star or you want to be part of our family. We know it's hopeless. She's never going back to him, but he doesn't know. He hopes there's some way he can pressure her into getting back together with him. And then she's broken by that point. She's broken by all of this. Everyone's using her. She finally has her son back, and she just loses it, makes fun of him, and he can't take it and shoots her. Jonathan says, very good scene. I'm not sure it lines up with some of the evidence. Well, there are some pieces of the evidence that are a little off, but I mean, I got it wrong on these counts, but I could absolutely see how it went this way. And yeah, I'm not sure. Well, let's pause for a second. Duke of Zil says, how is this game not known the world over? Okay, let's do this. Do we have a 1 minute break? No, we've got a 5 minute break. I feel like we should review the game and take a 5 minute break. I know everyone's getting tired, but it's the way we do it. So I think we take a 5 minute break and then we'll review the case. So gather your thought, 5 minute break. I hope you can stay awake for 5 more minutes. We'll come back in 5 minutes and talk about our thoughts of the game. Okay, we're back. You're watching Call for Two. We have finished playing Mortem L.A. Lights, Camera, Murder, the first of 3 cases in this series, created in 2018. One of us, Jonathan Warner, got all 3 questions correct. The other 2 of us got most of them wrong, or the key things wrong. And it's time to talk about the experience as a whole. So I want to make a couple of points, and then we'll go to the chat and hear from Jonathan and Duke of Zill. First of all, I think the totality of this experience with these amazing maps, it really is shocking how this game seems to have flown under the radar. It is a true descendant of Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective and Gumshoe. Gumshoe, this 1986 rare game that's sort of notoriously amazing and difficult and epic. This feels like a very worthy successor. And if you like Gumshoe, you're going to like this. The production quality is off the chart. Now, this is a $69 game. We'll talk about the expense of that later. But even without these props that came with this evidence, it's an amazing experience. And if money is no object, the fact that these pieces of evidence came out slowly and were hidden in envelopes, the actual documents, birth certificate, photos, crumpled up pieces of paper, it was all a pretty amazing experience physically, but also masterfully written. I mean, this felt like we were in a film noir movie. From moment 1, the description of the scene of the crime, to the last sentence of the solution. There wasn't a moment that took us out of being in a gritty film noir 1940s gumshoe world. The writing was very high quality. There were real moments of humor. You get a sense in the best of these games of a writer of confidence. And part of what that means is taking their time, spending as much time as needed, describing each scene, each person, giving us enough exposure to people that we develop their personalities. There were a lot of bit characters, a couple main characters, but a lot of bit characters in this story that we had dialogue with. They all felt like different people. It was remarkable how many different people were sort of fleshed out in just a section or two, a page or two. Felt like they had different personalities. We met the we finally ran into the owner of Orpheum movie theaters, and he sounded like a totally different person with a totally different mindset than the other people. And the pacing was really good. Like the people that we were most interested in, it took us a while before we found them. There were some clever little things done in this clue book that reminded us of Gumshoe. Mostly you just look it up, but occasionally there was a choice in one. There was a little thing that came out, and then some told us to bring out evidence. The writing quality of the dialogue was so good, it made it enjoyable. I mean, that's what really makes these games, like these Sherlock Holmes and Gumshoe games, is the feeling that you're in a novel or in a movie. And I think we really felt that here. But also, there was something cool about the setting of the story. Like, it opened not... A lot of these games, like, open on a mystery. Like, you don't know who got killed, why they were killed, whatever. This was a little different. This really felt like a film noir movie in the sense of, like, it opens on a murder-suicide. And there's a bunch of hints in the game of people talking about it. Like, yeah, it was a murder-suicide, or it was half murder-suicide. It turns out it kind of was. And the game was like telling you, you know, one person may have done the actual shooting, but it's the town that's responsible for the destruction of this person. And that was that's the kind of feel of these film noir movies, where it's sort of like the town is this force that's causing corruption and stuff. And those little side stories of corruption and stuff and mob influence were weaved in and out through here, and some as red herrings, but in a very satisfying way. They weren't pure red herrings. They're sort of people who are sort of responsible for the doom of this person, even if they're not responsible for the actual shooting. Emotionally very resonant, very well done. I loved the ending. And I'm going to get to the chat comments in a second, but I do want to say something I said before is when we played our first session after about 6 hours, it kind of felt like, okay, Joe Fletcher did do it. He was trying to blackmail her. It all seemed relatively simple. And then as I chewed on it overnight, things didn't feel like they all lined up in place. There were weird things, the hat not fitting, the locket missing, the 2 notes, one that said us, one says I'm begging you, and then this one is saying without me you'd have nothing, no career cafe. That made me feel like this was Deasy writing this. And then it went from I am doing this to you. That made me question whether it was as straightforward as Joe Fletcher writing notes. I think maybe now, given the ending, this is the one he just wrote at the end. I wonder if this us, do you think this us is Joe Fletcher and the son? He's sort of writing on the son's behalf. He's talking about like the family. Like, you're forcing us to do this. You're forcing me and your son, who you've abandoned, to do this. He's in his mind thinking he's worried about the son. You can't run from your past or from us. I think this us, we finally solved that mystery. I think he's talking about the son, which is pretty remarkable because we really struggled understanding why it's I'm begging you in February and us on April, but now it makes sense. And here's another thing that was really remarkable at this case from a writing standpoint. We've talked about in some of these games how the murdered person is sort of off screen. We don't learn anything about them. And that was true in this case too. Clara gets killed and Joe Fletcher gets killed from scene 1. But the writing really fleshed out Clara. We heard about Clara from all different people who knew her. We got her whole story fleshed out to where we felt like we knew her. Joe Fletcher, less so, but in a very purposeful way. It really felt like he was kept a little bit of an enigma for the mystery to work for us. We see the letters he presumably wrote. and he was doing stuff throughout, but we heard about him, but in a very effective way that we didn't have a full handle on his psychology. And we were told by someone that he was still in love with her, but we didn't know whether to trust that person. And that was ultimately the downfall of my theory of the case and Duke of Zill's, that person who seemed to confess to us that they were defrauding her and wouldn't reveal her secret told us that Fletcher was really in love with her. But because I had so many doubts about him, I couldn't see the full picture. But looking back, I think the psychology of Joe Fletcher does make sense with the rest of these clues and makes sense with these notes. Like when I read this, I said, you have nothing, you'd have nothing without me. No career, no cafe, no nothing. So I said, oh, that's got to be her ex-manager, Deasy. And Jonathan Warner was saying in the channel, well, we don't know. We don't know their history. Maybe Fletcher thinks he's responsible. But now that we sort of see his psychotic, not psychotic, but the jealous husband, we know these people exist. And he somehow thinks he is responsible for her success. And it's not that far-fetched to think this guy, this violent guy who's a bad, mean drunk, thinks he's owed this woman, that he owns her and she shouldn't be leaving him. And it's a little close to reality, this idea of the ex-husband who kills the ex-wife because he can't have her, and the idea that he's using his son to try to pressure her into getting back together. This is all a little close to home, but very resonant. Makes sense. Let's check in on the chat and see what Jonathan Warner and Duke of Zill says. John says, there's a lot to talk about. Duke of Zill says, for me, that was a better ending experience than almost any watertight solution could have offered. It was incredibly well written. I agree with you. Like, I'd rather have that beautifully written emotional ending than worry about some details that all the clues were accounted for. Jonathan Warner says, overall, extremely well written, majority of the time very well paced, few issues with evidence, not cheap for one case. Yeah, I think we can return to the cost later. I think that is worth saying. And Jonathan's agreeing with my reading of the why the second blackmail note is talking about us. John says, I think that's a great point. Fleshing out of Clara. I thought the pacing was really good. And, you know, we've talked about how hard it is to get the difficulty of these things right. And I was so excited after yesterday to realize I've got questions. This doesn't feel so cut and dry to me. And we spent a long time in this session chewing on our final theories and worrying about them. And sort of almost in the end, we were like, well, it could be this, could be this. We weren't that engaged. But the fact that it wasn't clear, that we got to the end, the answers weren't completely clear to us. But not only that, we didn't have a full picture of the explanation for everything. And boy, that ending gave it to us nicely, though. And that's sort of what you want. You want the answer. One of us got it right. The answers to be sort of figure outable, or at least borderline, but then the ending even gave us more of some cool backstory that you weren't meant to figure out, but maybe have gotten a hint to. And I will say we had some real aha moments here. The thing with the birth certificate, we spent a bunch of time thinking, is that the son? Is that not the son? It seems like a coincidence, but then there were lots of little subtle things, like he was a minor at the time, and if his birthday is in April, that clicked. And then we finally clicked and realized his name matched, and we went back to that paragraph, and his name was just mentioned a little snuck in. There was some very clever writing in this game, and very clever dripping out of hints. And when we started playing, it felt like there were things that were overdetermined. There were things that, like, the detective's name we found of the burglary was in the newspaper. We were smart enough to spot that, and then it gave it to us again, 2 or 3 other places. And so early on, I thought, oh, okay, that's how the difficulty is being run in this game. Like, they've decided to make it a lot easier than we would want. So we got a couple of clues. We got a bunch of clues in the beginning that were overdetermined, that were given to us in 3 different places. And from our standpoint, it would have been more enjoyable if it was only given to us one. It took us lots of skill to figure that out. So I think we might have wanted some of those things harder. But there were a couple of clues that were only mentioned in one place, and that was one of them. So that was enjoyable. Jonathan says, for me, the pacing at the very beginning was a little off. Felt like we got a lot of evidence bags during the part where we were still just at the movie lot. I think the pacing got really good and stayed really good once we got off the movie lot. I think you're right. I think that's a great point. I think Jonathan is right. The pacing in the beginning was a little off. And in fact, if you had gone to the informants, it would be even off even more, because you got given a lot of information in the beginning, and a lot of the evidence came out very quickly, those evidence bags. Jonathan, that's a great point. I think we went through all of the evidence bags very early, and it would have been much better to stretch those out. Absolutely. Most of the evidence bags had papers and crumpled up, and then we had one, which was a very cool moment, when the key came out. Where is that key? The key came out in his car. Now, that was a complete gimmick. We didn't need that. It was fun, though. But everything else was paper. This was the only one item. And I'll tell you what was cool. This part was cool, too. It wasn't just that there was a key. It was that we used this to realize, oh, is there a hotel that makes sense of this? And then we figure out it was Sandman. So that was very cool, but I agree, Jonathan is right. Too much of the evidence came out far too soon, and it was front-loaded with much too much stuff. It would have been better to pace it out. After that, though, the pace was really well done after that. Jonathan says, weirdly, one informant talks about the sidewalk cafe earlier. Yeah, most of the informants seemed like they were just there for flavor, but then a couple of them said things that we should not have been told. Like, if you had gone there earlier, you would have given away something that was quite fun to find out and figure out. I think the informants were a little off. That was a little weird, the informants. And I think that brings up a thought I had. Well, let's see. Before I say that, let me just read here. One of my favorite story moments, says Duke, so the part where we were questioning the guy in the bowling alley. It mentions the sound of a strike earlier in the conversation when things are fine. Then as the conversation sours, we hear a gutter ball reflecting the state of the conversation. It was lovely. It's not just that, but that scene is a good example of how well the writing was done that painted this character, because he was a character. It was Eddie Kroger or something, the silent partner, and he talked in a very stylized, weird way, right? I mean, I almost want to read it because it was pretty cool how he talked to us. He welcomed us in, and he was like, let me just read it because it was pretty cool. What was he? What item was it? Well, I guess you can go back and read it. I don't have to find it. But he was a very interesting character. And in the end, we say to him, he's like, I don't want to murder her. She's how we draw to the cafe. They come to see a star. And then we say to him, yeah, but if she was murdered, people would be even more interested in going to a murdered star's cafe. And he says, that's a very dark thought. And let me just point out, you're the one who came up with that, not me. It was just, he talked in an interesting way. Yeah. And Jonathan has pointed this out before that I think also is worth mentioning, that few of these games capture so well. Sense of place. And this really had that perfect balance of sense of place, description of place, and then people and dialogue. So Duke of Zill was talking about the description of this scene in the bowling alley, and I was talking about what an interesting character and way of speaking it was. But this game really did both throughout. It painted this picture of these scenes, whether we're in the movie owner's place with the two brutes behind us or in this bowling alley. The writing painted a beautiful, believable, immersive picture of each scene, which was interesting. And then the dialogue was also so interesting. And not just interesting, but, you know, you want to know a heuristic to tell whether a game's going to be good. Look at the moments of humor in the writing for these games. And there were some real humorous moments in some of our interactions. And that was really satisfying. And we met Ida Lupino, a real movie star, and we took a look at some of her interviews. That was super fun. Jonathan says, I agree the informants were off, and if you went to all of them first, it would slow down the game pace at the beginning a lot. I don't think there's any issue with the game in terms of writing. I think it's top-notch, right up there with Robert Prentice ending. Yeah, another really emotional and sort of satisfying, poignant ending. Should we talk about any clues that we felt were unfair? Is there anything that we thought was unfair? I feel like all the misdirection red herrings were fair. Like, you know, I've talked about these a lot because I focused a lot on these notes all being sent. So the game tells us these were all sent by Fletcher. I think we now understand what the us was. That was pretty cool. Now, could you have figured out, was there any evidence that Fletcher contacted the son and tried to bring him into this? No. That's a good example of a part of the story and solution that we weren't meant to figure out. It makes sense in retrospect, but we couldn't have figured that out. Now, would you want in a game? It's a very valid question. Do you want, if you're the kind of person that really wants to have been able to figure out everything, you might say, well, there should have been a way in the game for me to have figured out that Fletcher had contacted his son. And I have some sympathy to that claim. There was nothing that could have suggested to us that Fletcher had reached out to his son, unless I'm missing something. And maybe it would have been better if it gave us some clue to that. Looking back on it, we have no evidence about that. But looking back, we do have evidence to make sense of this us versus I part, which is very cool. If you look at something like this is just an example. He's saying, my lawyers will, I'm done with this, my lawyers will, as he's writing this letter. Okay, so we tried to find lawyers, and we didn't find any lawyers of his. That's not a mistake in the game. That's someone writing to a lawyer, trying to sort of threaten him, and just making up the fact that he has lawyers when he doesn't. Completely reasonable. There are some things... Okay, let's look at Jonathan, because Jonathan was going to say one of the other things. Jonathan says, the photo is way off in my opinion. I don't think those bodies look how the final scene describes. That is the main issue I have. So I think Jonathan is talking about something that I was going to mention. This ending scene, we're told that the way it worked was the three of them are there, right close together. Then the husband sort of gets infuriated when she makes fun of him, shoots her in the stomach, in the chest, kills her. And then the son immediately struggles for the gun, gets it, and shoots him. And Jonathan was saying, I don't think that's where their bodies would be. I don't know, Jonathan. I don't know if I totally agree with that. It does feel like maybe there should have been more time between the two shots if they were having a fight over it. But remember, the son describes the scene of the three of them almost being touching each other. Like the father was almost hugging them, he says. So if you imagine that the father kind of freaked out when she made fun of him and just shot her at close range, and the son just loses it, grabs the gun, shoots him in the face, like barely a struggle. I don't know. I think that's good enough for me. The witnesses describe hearing 2 bangs. We're not really told how close in succession. I think that's within the realm of being able to play with your expectations to lead you in the wrong track. Duke of Zil says the only lead that wasn't as clean as the rest was finding her second house. We deduced it fairly easily, but it was weird that our character had the exact address, but we didn't. Okay, let's talk about some of the leads that were weird. That was a weird lead. We were able to find it by address, and it was kind of fun that we had to find it by address. But I do think you're right. There was a miss there, and the solution to that would be to not say that she gave us the exact address. A fun solution to that puzzle would have been just that we heard the house was on Gramercy and Broadway, and then we'd have to find it. And in fact, I wish there was more of that. I wish there were more occasions where we knew the general area of something and had to find it on the map and then go there. That would have been fun. Jonathan says, it said the mother crashed into the son, both fell. That's right. You're right. He said the mother got shot backward onto him. The son got back up. They fought. The son fell back down, then points up and shoots the father. Yes, you're right. That's how it described it. I think maybe it would have been nicer. Well, let me agree with Jonathan on one point. It would have been nicer if the scene was described as more consistent with that. And maybe if there was more of a delay between shots described by the audience, by the witnesses. But I'm okay with that. I mean, the game is deliberately trying to put in some doubt. And I think we have to... It's always possible to look at these games and being like, that was misleading, that thing. It seemed kind of fakey that it misled us. Like the thing about the hat size being too big. Like there were a bunch of things. And this note saying, you would have nothing without me, no career, no cafe. There are lots of little misdirections. And I think the fact that, Jonathan, you got the questions right and that I got it wrong, I think that has to be given as a credit to the writer. Like, you can't complain of misdirections when without them it would be too easy. You sort of want the author to be throwing in as many misdirections as they can to instill doubt, but have you still work it out right. And it's kind of fun that in this game it kind of succeeded. Some of us got it right, some of us didn't. And it came down in the end, the way I like it to come down is sort of your gut intuition about who to trust. And with Deezy's confession, when we finally confronted him, I was really torn. And if you believed it, then Fletcher was your person. And if you didn't, Deezy was your person. So I liked that the misdirections sowed enough doubt in me that I didn't know where to go. But I agree, the end scene, you could argue it would have been better if it was described a little more believably, but I was okay with that. There was another, almost through 99% of the game, when we looked up a clue, there was an entry for it. The thing about not being able to find Camilla was weird. That I found weird. We had the wife of William Hale mentioned a few times. Another misdirection was the inconsistency between William Hale saying he was in his trailer and the other woman saying she saw him leaving the scene. That's completely fair misdirection, and William Hale wasn't super clear about where he was, so I think that's all reasonable. It was weird that there was all this pointing about Camilla, the wife, how we had to work to find her first name. It was weird that we couldn't talk to her. that was a little weird. That feels like a little miss. Like, it would have been cool if there was a way to find her through one of the dress shops and that she just told you, you know, I got into an argument with her. You wouldn't even have to you wouldn't even have to make anything clearer. You just have to have a way to talk to her. And I think that would have been suitable. It's weird. Yeah, his arms are a little weird in the photo. I agree with that. But reasonable. Reasonable. Any other clues that caused us some trouble? The game did one of those things that I love. I love when you think it's one person or you suspect someone and then you sort of tie them off and then you go back and you think that someone you thought did it and then you realize they didn't. Like, that little pacing of your suspicions is really nice. It's much more satisfying than when you gradually just build up increasing evidence that it's one person. So for a while after Last Night, I was like, it's Friedrich. It's the owner of Orpheum. He had the illegitimate child. She confronted him about it, and he killed her. And remember, the mobster suggests that the two red-headed giants might have been hired to kill her. So, like, a little misdirection there. But I thought it was the Orpheum owner. And then we finally have this showdown with him. And he's very philosophical. And he's like what you would expect a big, powerful person in high up places. He's like, yeah, I bear some responsibility, but I didn't kill her. And he's sort of like giving us some advice, talking down to us. It was a cool scene, and it made me realize, okay, it's not him. He's too full of himself. He's too sure of himself. He didn't have to kill anyone. Jonathan says, how do you feel about the handwriting? I thought it was good, but you got a little more tied up in it. I did. Handwriting is an element that's present in a lot of these games. We've seen it in short. We've seen it from the Too Easy case, which we saw. I won't mention. I don't want to have any spoilers. But we've seen it where games use a font so that the handwriting is identical. And then we've seen it in games where we saw it in a Dennis Wheatley, where it was like, it said you looked at the handwriting and you could tell discrepancy. And we're like, what are you talking about? There's no discrepancy. This one felt reasonable to me. In other words, I could, if you wanted to argue one way or the other, I could buy it. It felt ambiguous in a real world way. There were areas where it looked like the writing was identical. The exclamation points seemed to be trying to tell us that these are all the same handwriting. I think in the end, we did come to conclude that they were all the same handwriting. But it was sort of real. I would call this real world ambiguous. The handwriting was not super consistent. There were clues that it was the same handwriting, but you could also imagine that someone was manipulating it to look the same. I think in the end, we came to basically the right decision about it. In fact, I'll go further. I'll say this is how I want the handwriting to be. Duke of Zill says, the letters felt like DZ to me the whole time because it didn't feel like Fletcher, but I love that it was because Fletcher had a warped view of reality. Knowing the end made it make sense. Yes, I like that. It does make sense looking back. And I will go further than that. I think this is what I want in my handwriting. This is the level of ambiguity. Like, Jonathan says, I thought it was good, but you got a little more tied up in it. And I guess what I would say is, that's what I want from the handwriting. This is what I want. This is the ideal situation for handwriting. We've got a good sample size that we can really look at. It's not uniformly consistent. It's ambiguous. It's enough there's enough meat on the bones to really try to look at it and study. And there's enough doubt that you're unsure. And that's what I want. I don't want it to be a font where it's 100% easily clear it's the same handwriting. But the game has told us these are months apart. This is written possibly when he's drunk. So this is what I want. I want it to be not clear to me when I stare at the handwriting and to sort of have to go with some gut. And I don't expect handwriting to be super consistent across different words and different letters. And the fact that sometimes he's using a Y, like this is real. Sometimes he uses a very scripted Y, and sometimes he's writing a Y like this. That's how people do it. People aren't 100% consistent. So I would say, actually, I really was happy with the handwriting. It was more the content about no career, no cafe, no nothing. And I think, Jonathan, you pointed out we don't know the history, but I think as Duke of Zil was pointing out, the fact that the husband has this warped sense of ownership and self-worth, that he's thinking he's the responsible for her success, also makes sense. So he just thinks he's responsible for everything. John says, one thing I did like about the very beginning was how mystery of murder and also mystery of missing car. These Sherlock Holmes Consulting detectives are good at setting up multiple mystery elements. Document dump games often feel just like someone got murdered. Yeah, I think that's a very astute point. And in fact, I think you could go further. There were lots of little mini mysteries going on. Mysteries about what the phone calls were about, a mystery about the car, mystery about what was going on at the sidewalk cafe, who owned it, who had ownership, etc. Lots of little mini mysteries here. And I think you're right. The best of the Sherlock Holmes Consulting detective games makes use of that, and this game makes use of it too. And now the car thing was almost, I'm not sure how much I loved the whole car. I think that falls into that category of it giving us, as soon as we walked around the lot, we found the car parked outside the lot. Then we got the key. Then we got like 3 pieces of evidence right away from that car. And it's not even clear to me why that car didn't, I guess it didn't pull into the lot because he wasn't wanted on the lot, but it didn't feel like it was needed to be a mystery. I guess that's another way of saying it. Like, I like that there were lots of little mysteries, but it was weird to make a mystery out of that car, I guess I would say. Like, there was nothing important about where the meeting was. There was nothing important about where the car was. So I guess I was a little, I wasn't as thrilled with that. Duke of Zil says, I'm glad the handwriting was the same person, even though I was wrong on who the author was, because if they tried to say it was 2 different people, I would have disliked that. Yes, I think that's fair. That's a fair statement. Also, as I pointed out when we were doing it, it's hard to know how you would get hold of these different letters. One thing that I was really hoping, though, one of the reasons why I was guessing DZ was I was really hoping that this crumpled up letter we found was a setup, like someone put it there for us to find. I don't know that we've yet played one of these games where someone's planted evidence meant to lead us on the wrong trail. And I would like to see a little bit more of that element. John, continuing, I meant in particular that the setups for Sherlock Holmes Consulting often have a couple mystery elements just in the setup, while the mystery suspect games only have one mystery in the murder. Yes, yeah, let's say a little bit more about that. These mystery suspect games, in particular the cheaper ones from Amazon, they almost feel like they're the locked room, the Agatha Christie. You go into a room, the person's dead, you've got 8 suspects, you're told why each 8 wanted to murder them, and you're just trying to rule out alibis. There's no other mystery other than figuring out who killed them, who had the opportunity. And this was a much more fuller case with little mysteries. And I did like the way the game even set up and told us, look, it's not just about who killed her, but who's responsible for her death, and sort of put this bigger philosophical mystery to us. Because I wonder what the distance was between the movie lot and Andy's home if we assume he was driven there by Fletcher but had to leave on foot and seemingly didn't catch a cab. That's interesting. Well, I guess we can answer that. The Needhams are the home. The Needham home is I-3. So actually, their home is here, and the movie lot is here. So that's a long walk, but we're told 1 inch is 0.4 miles. So if you figure each of these are 2 inches, you've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 7 miles. It's walkable. It's walkable in a straight line. I don't know how walkable these streets are in Los Angeles, but it's walkable, and you just murdered someone, or you hitchhike. Donovan says, back to the evidence. I didn't really think about it, but you point out how you thought Fletcher could not be the father because he was married to Clara and the son would be legitimate. How do you feel about that now? That's a good point. Yeah, that was my objection, wasn't it? And I furthermore made the case that I don't think we could know who the father is, and it's not important. Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, maybe I was being too flippant to say that it wasn't an illegitimate. I guess, we may have gotten stuck on the idea that it was an illegitimate child would have ruined her career. Maybe we should have paid more. Maybe the way the game explained it to us in the end was, it wasn't that it was an illegitimate child. It was just that she had to choose movie star or mother. And she chose to be movie star. And that's what broke her. And maybe that's what broke the marriage. So I think where we got hung up was the idea that it was an illegitimate son that would cause her trouble. But don't forget, in the end, she says he's not the father. So it wasn't, so she got pregnant through maybe Otto Friedrich, the producer at the time or whatever. So that may have served to break her. But so in reality, I guess it's not quite true. It's not quite true that I said Fletcher can't be the father because they could have just had the kid as a happy family. So maybe, it's a combination of things. She thinks I can't have a kid because I can't be a movie star, and I don't know who the father is, and the father was this guy who took advantage of me. Maybe she tells Fletcher, I can't have a kid. It's your kid, but I can't have a kid because it'll ruin my profession. Either way, it emotionally breaks her. And probably it emotionally breaks the marriage. And yeah. But the game didn't really help us to understand that Fletcher was the father, only at the end. Maybe that would be one little miss. I would have liked a tiny little clue. I'm not sure what the clue would have been, but maybe something to do with this birth certificate being addressed to Andy, like something that would suggest that he showed this to Andy. I'm not sure. Fletcher can't be blaming her for giving the son away. He'd had to be okay with it. Yeah. Yeah, I think they both came to the conclusion that for her career, and he wanted her money to give away the son. I think the father didn't really care that much about the son. He was just using the son to get his wife back, which makes some sense. One of the cool things was we all thought about, we had this locket mystery that we knew was a mystery to us. We knew it was important. Then in the end, we finally kind of made sense. We all sort of agreed, okay, now that we know it's the son, it's probably the case that Andrew gave that locket to her eventually. And then we started playing with ways that could have happened. We all sort of thought, okay, Andrew was on the scene sort of stalking his mother because he missed her. And we came up with slightly different theories for that. Eventually, I settled on the idea that Andrew gave her the locket earlier. But Jonathan stayed with the theory that Andrew was on the scene with the locket. It's kind of fun that we came up with these cool stories for how Andrew could get on the scene or get the locket to her. But the ending was even more interesting. The idea that the father is actually bringing the son on his birthday to sort of confront the mother and say, choose us rather than your movie star role. And that he's in his mind thinking this is going to reestablish the family and fix everything, his last ditch effort. And then when that goes completely wrong, he loses it. I think that was a pretty damn fantastic little ending. John says, I think in general, I felt there was enough evidence to be able to guess the main answers, but not enough to have a firm grasp on details. I might have liked to be able to grasp it a little more. Some groups might want to be able to lock those details down a lot more. I agree with you. I do think that some groups would want to lock those details down more. From my standpoint, every day, every time, I will rather trade off ambiguity for satisfying struggle to understand. I do not want to be given. I'd rather have it that I couldn't have known exactly what would have happened, what happened, but have that enjoyable chewing on the facts and psychologically trying to bet on who I think did it, than have the game give me everything. And it's a very tight line to walk. It's very hard to tightrope to walk, whatever the expression is. It's very hard to get that right. And I feel pretty good about how this game did it. Like I said, I would have liked maybe just the tiniest bit of clue that Fletcher communicated with Andrew in some way, or communicated with the son or something. Duke of Zil says, we all have slightly different versions of what happened in those final moments, but I feel the final real story was the best of all. I agree with you. I agree with you about that. The only question is, if you were playing it, did you wish that you could have figured that out? Because you couldn't have figured that out. That ending was not figure-outable by us. I'm completely fine with that, but you could see how someone might. Duke says, locking down the details, this plays a lot more like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective in terms of answers requiring sort-based deductions from the players. I love that as long as the dots aren't too far apart to connect. Story-based deductions, yeah. But boy, really good. Now, I have confirmed that the other two cases don't use this map. That blows my mind. They both use much smaller maps. I feel like this may have been the most luxurious of the two cases. But as I said, the other two cases have books of clues that are just as big. It's just the map doesn't feel as rich. And in fairness, we didn't go to that many places on this map. I mean, it's nice to look at it. Let's take a look at all the places we went. We went all over the place, but you can see we couldn't have gone to more than 20% of the locations on this side of the map. And here it's even less, a lot less. Here most of our informants were, but almost all of these places we didn't go to, and this map is never used again. That blows my mind. It is ready for people to make their own expansions using this map. This was tailor-made for people who want to make expansions. Jonathan says, here's some advice. Have an evidence tag on the evidence when you take it out of the bag. We got lost for a second with where the evidence came from. Jonathan, fantastic point. The evidence tags showing what bag they came from would have made a lot more sense. Duke of Zil says this game does feel like case number 1 in a 40 case series of games. The connection to Gumshoe is really there. Gumshoe has 9 or 10 cases. Can I make a point? Early in the game, we run into a washed up Gumshoe on a tree. This game is set in 48. Gumshoe, where is it? Gumshoe is set in the 1930s. I think that was the guy from Gumshoe. I think that washed up Detective Gumshoe that we meet early on, sitting by a tree drunk, is the Gumshoe from Gumshoe. I think that's a little nod to Gumshoe. We're given a picture of a scene where we flip him a coin and he puts it in his pocket. I wonder if there's not some scene in Gumshoe where he does that. It could be just imagining something, but that's how I like to think of it. That our Gumshoe is sort of washed up and that's who we ran into. Jonathan says, Jesse, would you say that they could keep the evidence bags and get rid of the expensive props like the key? Absolutely. And I think like the key was cool. It's the only physical piece. And the fact that the letter was crumpled up was cool, but I'm on record. The key was very cool experience to drop it out, but $69 is too expensive for a one-off game for one evening. This puts this game basically double the price of any of these other comparable games. Whether it's worth it or not is going to be up to you. But from my standpoint, I'll take a photo of a key. I don't need a real key. And I don't need the paper to really be crumpled. I'll take a photo of a crumpled up paper. I do love the idea of evidence that only comes out when it tells you to. Like this idea when you read this paragraph that says take evidence B that's hidden. I think that's fantastic. I want more of that in these games, but it can just be a piece of paper in that little envelope. It does not have to be a physical key, and if that saves you money, that's fine with me. On the other hand, I'll pay the extra money for the key, but I just think if you're deciding as a company that it's too expensive to produce this and it's too much labor to build the box, I could live without the paper bags holding evidence and the physical key, if that's the difference between making it or not. But I'm okay with either. If the company says we make more money by making this a deluxe experience, go for it. Maybe we should spend a little bit of time talking about the price. So released in 2018, selling for $69, and rare enough that you can't find copies on eBay unless you're very lucky. Over time, you will. $69 is a bitter pill to swallow. That puts it way on the upper end of these games. If you imagine a Sherlock Holmes box, like Dave Neal's box, might cost you $45. And that's got 10 cases in it. So maybe you figure 5 or 6 times the length of gameplay in the box for a little more than half the cost. It's hard to justify. And Gumshoe has 10 cases in it. Maybe has 8 times as much content as this game. For maybe almost the same price, a little bit more. So it's hard to justify that price. It's made by a company that specializes in the hunter-killer-like subscription experiences. They're much more focused on expensive high-end experiences. Most of their games are like you get a statue of a monster's tooth or something and it's fully painted and it costs $200 and you just put it on the shelf and it's just for atmosphere. So you can see that's their focus. You could not have made this game much better. It was phenomenal. And if you ask me whether this $70 game is 3 times as good as the $29 Amazon games, or let's just say twice as good, I would say, like, I'd rather have one of these for $70 than $200 worth of the Amazon $30 cold case mystery suspect game. So in that sense, it's well worth the cost over the other mystery suspect games. That's for sure. I think it's a much harder sell when you compare it to the Sherlock Holmes Consulting detective boxes. I do wish that they had found a way to sell this maybe without the props. Well, I'm not going to tell a company what price to pay, but we can come at it from the other direction. It's a very weird thing that this series of 3 games are so different than the other games that the mystery package company makes. And these really are Sherlock Holmes Consulting detective games. These fit right at home on the Board Game Geek database as being Gumshoe, Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, and this. They're the same system. This is a proper tabletop board game, the same way those are. And it's crazy that this series is totally unknown to that audience. There wasn't a BGG page for it, so I just created it. And anyone who likes Gumshoe and Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective is going to love this. So we need to sort of get out the word about this. And it's still in print, still available. And I think if you can swallow the money, people should be buying this. This is a absolutely highest tier, highest quality writing, and incredibly good experience, incredibly good, satisfying mystery. If the money is worth it for you for a deluxe Sherlock Holmes Consulting detective experience, and especially if you love the Gumshoe film noir, amazing experience. And and deserves to be more widely known by that audience. I wish we knew the history of this, and I tried to reach out to them, and maybe we'll find out at some point. It almost feels like someone came up with this and it got licensed to them. I don't know. But then the fact that I think it was Duke of Zill that was pointing out that they've got a brand new case in this family. It's not set in L.A. There's 3 games set in L.A. post-mortem. I have all 3. I'm ready to play them whenever you want. And then there's a new London Gothic case, which is rated as moderate difficulty story narrative, so rated as the very same family as this set here. It's not out yet. It's again listed for $69. I think we buy that and we try it. But that would suggest that they've still got writers doing this. I'd love to hear who wrote this. I don't know why no author is credited. This is a very skilled writer who wrote this story and dialogue, and they deserve credit for it. A question in the chat was, I forget whether it was Jonathan or Duke of Zill asked, it was Duke of Zill, it says, I'm interested in how the other 2 compare to this one. Are they the same price? They are the same price. They look to me like they're not of the same caliber. They have a much smaller, sort of chintzier map. And they both look like they come with a poster that has no value, no meaning. It's just like, here's this cool poster from this world. So this map looks like it took years to make. Double-sided, incredibly sophisticated. And the maps from the other game look like they're just sort of thrown together, and that there's a prop there that's not that important. And the directory looks much thinner. But on the other hand, there is a review of this trilogy on YouTube. It looks like maybe by someone who hasn't played a lot of these games, or maybe tends to play the more of the hunt-a-killer type games. And my memory is, I didn't watch it, I just watched a part of it, but my memory is she said that this one was not her favorite. So we shouldn't rule out the idea that the others might even be better. John says, I wonder if at some point you were supposed to subscribe and get a new casebook each month or two. I don't know. I really don't know. One thing, though, I've said this a bunch, and I really think this is true. Number one, boy, is this ripe using this map and this directory for making more cases, more fan cases. You've got informants that you can reuse. Their personalities have been sketched out. You've got this beautiful double-sided map. You've got this framework of being a PI. This is really ripe to make fan cases. But then one step beyond that is that it is very hard to get a board game published, like a new box of Sherlock Holmes cases. Very hard to imagine getting that picked up. Dave Neal got it done, but the economic decisions for a company putting out a new board game to retail are very tough. But it's a very different picture for these companies that produce everything in-house and sell them through their website and already have a reputation established with people that already know they like the experiences made by that company. So if you were a big fan of Gumshoe, and there's someone on BGG who put a lot of work into an unfinished Gumshoe case, but if this is something that captures your interest, like making a Sherlock Holmes Gumshoe expansion, and you like Gumshoe and you like this world, I think there's a very high likelihood that if you did a good job, you could use this map, go to the mysterious package company, mystery package company or mysterious package company, and say, I've got a 4th LA post-mortem case for you. I think there's a very high likelihood that they would work with you to publish it. John says, author of the case, let us know what else you made. Yes, I mean, I've written to them, maybe on their website. Maybe you guys could as well. See if we can't, let's see if we can't, by the time we play all 3 cases, let's see if we can't get some information from the writers of this case. Because this was some very confident, good writing. Could the author have been Neil Patrick Harris all along? This is Jonathan. Neil Patrick Harris is involved with this company, Mystery Package Company or Mysterious Package Company. So maybe, I don't think it's Neil Patrick Harris, but it's a funny joke. I was thinking, if this was set in Chinatown, I would be inclined to believe that someone was writing a Gumshoe fan case and got absorbed into this. But, boy, it's recent enough. It's 2018. This is not like a 1986 lost case. The map is beautiful and beautifully readable. If you remember, the Gumshoe map is just basically they bought a map that was used for something else, and it was totally unreadable. It was just for flavor and for fun. You could put things out. But the fact that they've got these beautifully readable markers where each thing is, and that when you look up in the directory, it tells you the number, but also what neighborhood it's in by this grid, which makes it super easy to find everything and find, like, we had a post office clue here, right? Where we, like, she has a post office box. So we looked up her address. Then we looked up the post offices, right? Where were they? We looked up the post offices. And we said, well, where's the post office that's in her grid? And there was one 3 blocks away. And that was indeed where she had her P.O. box. Completely logical. Very cool. Post office boxes. So look at all these post offices. So all these post offices, and we just found the one that was in the same grid as her at Fairfax and Sunset, or wherever there it was, and that was where her P.O. box was. That was fun. I wish there were more of those. If we were advising someone who makes a future case, I'd like to have more geographic-based clues. And it's one way to hide stuff. Like, it's kind of fun to have to find a street because the map is so well labeled. This would not have been fun with the gumshoe maps. But because these maps are so well labeled, the streets are all readable. You could absolutely say, as the game did, that the house is at Gramercy and Broadway, and it might take the people 10 minutes to find Gramercy and Broadway, but they would find it. Space Cowboys needs to hire these people to do a new Sherlock Holmes Consulting detective box. There's still 2 entries we've never read. There aren't entries we haven't read. If you do like map puzzles, though, I think Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective itself still might have had the best of those I've seen. We have had some very fun Sherlock Holmes maps, puzzles, where you have to calculate how far could they have gone to do that. I agree. That Sherlock Holmes map has stood the test of time. It's interesting enough that there have been some good puzzles. Let's see which ones we didn't read. I believe they were related to the hotel choices. So if we go to 912, was 912 the hotel? Okay, if you've never been here before with the motel room key, so if you end up at the motel but without the key, which I don't know how that would happen, but if you do, you read 810. This says, if you haven't met Dimitri, go leave. Okay, so there's nowhere to leave. If this is the first time you don't have a key, go find a key. Otherwise, welcome. Okay, so then you get beat up. You could run or fight. So if we choose to fight instead, block the attack and fight. Sorry, I should be showing you this. We went to evade the attack bolt for the door. If we block the attack and fight back, go to 291. Okay, so if we had chosen that, let's see what would have happened to us. Your left arm rings out with pain as you block the metal pipe and throw across with your right. Your knuckles meet with lips and teeth. But as you're about to bring your knee into things, primarily your attacker's chin, something flashes through your brain, a thudding bolt from the back of your skull. You reel into the center of the room trying to find your feet, and now you're seeing double, identical giant men with the same flaming hair, either side of the door swinging their pipes in the air. To stand your ground and keep on fighting, go to 307. To run full speed at the door, go to 614. So if we try to run, that gets us the same, no doubt, answer that we got when we tried to run. What did I do? I lost it. Block the attack, fight back. All right, so 291. All right, so if we try to run for the door, presumably it's the same thing that we got when we originally tried to run. No, it's different. Okay. Okay, so if you stand your ground and try to keep fighting, you go to 307. Okay, this is... if you try to keep fighting, you just wake up at the pool. It didn't work. To stand your ground and keep fighting, you wake up at the pool. Where we opened the evidence, that's where we found the thing from the thing. If we run full speed at the door, we get this. You burst through the door into the hazy midnight blue of the Sandman's parking lot. You stumble towards your car, hot blood on your face, the neon buzzing above you. Without looking back at the red-headed demons, you leap into the driver's seat, turn the engine, and peel out onto Robertson Boulevard. Only once your heartbeat is lowered and you've reached cruising speed, you take a breath and dig a hand into your pocket. And that's when you get the evidence. Okay, so arguably that's your best outcome. Fight and then run for the door, rather than fight, or run direct. Jonathan says, we mentioned it before, but the system for finding the page after learning the password was good. I don't know that we did mention it, but you're right. There are several parts. There's a couple of choose your own adventures here. And there are a couple parts that say, go to the number of the entry that's 100 less than wherever you found this clue or secret password or whatever. There's a couple of those. Those worked fantastically. Those worked really well, and they feel, I think Gumshoe had a little bit of that. I'm not sure, and some of the Sherlock Holmes cases have that too. Not the originals, I think, but I think David Neal's Sherlock Holmes had a couple of those too. It's very clever and it worked. And I have to say, I did not like this idea of this small book. Thematically, it's explained nicely. This is a, what do they call this? Something kind of novel, like a dime store novel, where these film noir books would have been written. So it thematically fit in. But I will say that it actually worked pretty well. We could read it, but more than that, it's sort of, Jonathan was saying, I mean, at one point we said, well, you can see the numbers, so it makes it easier to see a wrong number. But on the other hand, when you're looking for the clue entries in the paragraphs of the Sherlock Holmes, it almost feels like you're seeing a lot that you can't help but not see. Whereas here, you know, if you're getting clue 100, you go right to 100. Maybe you see a little bit on either side, but very little. And it's isolated, right? I mean, like you go to clue 98, and it's very isolated while you're reading it. You can't read anything else, everything on its own page. So while you're reading it, it's not revealing anything else, really. And because they're all sequential, they're very easy to find. In Sherlock Holmes, there's 4 different neighborhoods, and like I'm losing track of which one's northwest, southeast. And the size of this and the size of the print meant that almost every clue was on one little page. That was quite nice, quite convenient. Yeah, I like the idea of selling the case expansions in this book form. Could give you a description of the case on the back, help you decide if you wanted to buy the case. Duke of Zill says, it didn't reveal 6 or 7 leads like each page in Sherlock Holmes. That's exactly right. It's a little hard for me to get a feel for how much text is here compared to a standard Sherlock Holmes Consulting detective case. Do you guys have any feeling for that? I feel like this is more than you would get in a normal Sherlock Holmes Consulting detective case. More writing than you would. Maybe twice as much? Maybe this case is twice as big as a Sherlock Holmes Consulting detective case? Or you think more? I can't tell. The story in this I felt was so good, and it's so like it everything about it felt right for what we thought it was in its time. It was a film noir movie with people with dirty, gritty motives that even when they're not to blame or the criminal, they still leave you feeling a little dirty. Duke of Sill says definitely more than a Sherlock Holmes case. Yeah. Maybe 2 or 3 times as much. I loved this photo we got early on. it would have been nice for pacing if there was some piece of evidence that we didn't get till the very end. It would have been nice for pacing if the evidence was spread out more. How many leads did we follow? 40. How do I tell? Well, we can tell on the map, most of them. Looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. 29, 30, 31, 32, 3, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, about 40. About 40, and then there were a couple that don't have a location, but about 40. It had a nice mix of short paragraphs and long multi-page thing. That's always fun in the Sherlock Holmes, to mix those things up. There are places you go that have very short description, and then places you go where you're like, oh, this is exciting. I'm going to get a lot of exposition and open up the case. Anything else for us to say about this? I mean, we really liked it. It was really good. I wonder about the other cases. I guess if this is going to be our main review, let me go get the other cases so I can show you. Let's just take a quick look here. Duke of Zill said, I loved it. Duke, normally Duke of Zill doesn't join us for these, so it was fun having Duke here as well with us. Okay, so just to show you what the cases look like. Newspaper, evidence bag. Here's the booklet for Lucha Muerte. This booklet is bigger. So, not hugely bigger, but this booklet on the right is the new booklet for the new case, is bigger. Set in the same time. But what I want to point out to you is, here is the map for this one. Single-sided. Let's put this aside. Okay, so here's the map for Lucha Muerte. Smaller, fewer places, only single-sided. It's got a fair number of places, but you can see much reduced. And then it has a poster that looks like it's just meant to put on your wall for fun. It doesn't have any content to speak of. I don't know if there's a... I don't want to show it to you because I don't know if the game gives it to you at any point. But that's basically it. And 1, 2, 3, 4, same number of packages of evidence. And then if we look at the other one, La La Land, again, one sheet of newspaper, a poster that's irrelevant, and here's the map for La La Land. Again, single-sided, much smaller map with much fewer places. So it doesn't really fill you with as much awe as the first one. Although in fairness, this map is huge, but we only went to 40 places, and I don't know, maybe there's 40 places total on this whole map. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 21, 22. There aren't even 40 places on this map. So, but again, the storybooks are just as big. So Jonathan says, La La Land looks like noir mixed with Scooby-Doo, so I'm very curious about what its tone will be. Yeah, I'm curious about those. I've got some trepidation because they don't look nearly as enthralling. When you look at this map, it feels like it's going to be good. Those, not so much, but it's certainly possible that they're just as good or better. We don't know. We don't know if they're going to. This was quite adult, right? There was some cursing, there were adult themes. The first scene opens up with a guy's mouth blown into his teeth. Very adult. I don't know if that's going to be the case with the others. I think they're advertised for the same age. So we don't even know if it's written by the same people because there's no authors. But the question is, when shall we play them? Are you ready to jump into case 2? There's some value in playing them all, in sequence. I can review them all with a non-spoiler review when we finish. Jonathan says the description of the head wound was surprisingly graphic. Yes. So what do you think? Shall we play the second case next week? La La Land is case 2. Is that what we think? It's on the website somewhere, probably. I think that makes sense. It'll probably take us 2 sessions again. Oh, it's already 7 a.m. So yeah. Well, we did have some downtime, but probably 2 sessions each. So maybe we need to block off 2 days in a row for playing the next session. Jonathan is, as always, the primary determinant of when we play. And I'm up for trying case 2 next week. Wednesday, Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It definitely helps us when we play these one day after the next, when it's fresh in our mind. We should remember that it's possible, if there are less locations in these other games and larger book, it's possible that the entries are longer. Each entry is longer, which would be a little disappointing because the entries were the right length, and when they get to be too long, it feels a little bit too much like just reading. And we don't have to decide now about when we play the next case, just something to consider. The only trouble with Duke of Zil joining us is we started an hour and a half late today, which is a little hard to do as a regular basis. We may have to start these at 11 p.m. as normal. Or if you guys wanted to try one starting during the day. Okay, so Duke of Zil may not be able to join us next week. So maybe, Jonathan, it's just you and I next week for case 2, or we could play something else before we get back to these cases. Let's talk about it. We'll talk about it offline. Anything else to talk about before we wrap this up at 7 a.m. on Thursday? Is it Thursday or Wednesday? We played Tuesday, Thursday. It's Thursday. Anything else to talk about? Any other, I guess when it's 7 a.m., when we've talked for an hour about the game, we should probably cut short our side discussions of movies. L.A. Confidential was a modern noir movie. Chinatown, classic noir movie, all recommended. And then there's a whole bunch of old, really old 1940s famous noir movies. You can get some good lists on the web of like best film noir movies, etc. John says, thinking about Gumshoe in this made me think about how I wish someone would make more L.A. Noir, the video game. Jonathan, did you finish L.A. Noir, the computer game? I couldn't finish it. It was very cool. I just couldn't fully get into it. Nightmare Alley is a good noir movie, says Duke of Zill. Duke of Zill says April 13th to 18th. I'm free anytime. Won't be working. Perhaps in time for case 3 if case 2 is next week. So we might do that. That might make sense. That might be the way to go. John says, I did finish L.A. Noir. It ends in a way where there does not need to be a sequel, but I would still like more. They made a VR cases for L.A. Noir. I believe they're separate standalone cases, only to be played VR. I have an Oculus Quest. It's pretty amazing as a VR headset. So if you decide to get a VR headset, Jonathan, you might be able to play more L.A. Noir, the VR cases. Something to consider. I recommend it. I recommend the Oculus Quest 2. It's a pretty cool experience. All right. So stay tuned on the channel. We're going to sign off now. Stay tuned on the channel for when we're going to play Case 2. Hopefully we'll get some information from the authors of this eventually. After we play all 3 cases, I'll make a spoiler-free review, a short one, at some point. We've also got Bureau of investigations in Arkham and elsewhere in the mail to us that we have to play eventually. Seems like we've got an infinite supply of games to play. I'm looking forward to it. So far, we've had a long run of very high quality games we've played. I feel very lucky and surprised. Our luck is bound to fail us sooner or later. Duke of Zill also points out Martian Investigations, which I've printed out. We do have to play that, and we need to start playing some fan-made scenarios. All right, with that, I'm going to sign off. I will see you probably next week. Sorry for the network streaming problems, but we handled it like pros. And with that, I'll see you both and everyone else next time.